The snow fell like ash over Central Park at 2 in the morning, each flake a whispered secret dissolving on contact with the frozen earth. Jae-Hoon Park walked alone through the darkness, his brioni overcoat doing little to shield him from the knife-edge wind that sliced between the skeletal trees. His breath came in controlled clouds, perfectly measured even as his mind churned with the bitter aftertaste of betrayal. The meeting had gone poorly. Worse than poorly. Numbers that didn't add up. Shipments that vanished like smoke. And through it all, the careful silence of men who knew more than they were saying. Someone in his inner circle was bleeding him dry, and the taste of it sat on his tongue like metal and bile. He almost didn't see her. Just another shadow among shadows, a dark shape huddled on a bench near the old stone bridge. His trained eyes catalogued it automatically, homeless, probably seeking shelter in the park's dubious safety, and he would have kept walking. Should have kept walking. But something made him pause. The particular way the snow had gathered on her shoulders. The unnatural stillness. The complete absence of breath fog in the frozen air. Jae-Hoon's hand went instinctively to the gun beneath his coat as he approached, his footsteps silent on the fresh powder. Then he saw her face and the world tilted sideways. Regina? Her name left his lips in a shocked exhale, the syllables carrying more emotion than he'd allowed himself in years. Even unconscious, her features were unmistakable. Those high cheekbones that could cut glass, full lips now turned an alarming shade of blue, dark curls matted with ice and dusted white with snow. Her skin, that rich deep brown that had reminded him of expensive coffee, looked ashen in the dim lamplight. She wasn't breathing. Or barely breathing. He couldn't tell. He dropped to his knees beside her, expensive wool soaking instantly through, his hands already moving with the clinical precision of someone who'd seen death too many times. Pulse check first. His fingers found her throat, pressed against the carotid. There, faint, irregular but there. Her skin felt like marble, cold enough to burn. Regina, wake up. His accent thickened with urgency, the Korean edges sharpening his consonants. Come on. Open your eyes. Nothing. Her body was curled in on itself, arms wrapped tight around her torso in a futile attempt at warmth. She wore only a thin jacket over what looked like the same cleaning uniform she'd worn when she worked for him. No hat. No gloves. Her hands were locked together against her chest, fingers frozen into claws. Jae-Hoon pried them open carefully, afraid he might break something. Paper crinkled beneath his touch. She was clutching something even in her hypothermic stupor. He extracted the crumpled documents one by one, smoothing them against his thigh. The first was a hospital bill. Mount Sinai Medical Center. Patient, Destiny Matthews. His eyes scanned the figures, each line item a small violence. Chemotherapy. Radiation oncology. Inpatient care. The total at the bottom made him inhale sharply. $63,847. Stamped across it in angry red, overdue, final notice, account sent to collections. The second document was an eviction notice. 5 days past due. All belongings to be removed by, he checked the date, 3 days ago. The third thing wasn't paper. It was a photograph, edges soft with handling, colors faded. A teenage girl in a hospital bed, beautiful even with her head wrapped in a colorful scarf, oxygen mask slightly fogged. She was smiling at the camera with Regina's same bright eyes, one hand raised in a peace sign. On the back, written in careful script. Destiny, St. Mary's Hospital, December 2023. Stay strong, baby girl. I got you. Jae-Hoon's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. He remembered the day he'd fired her. 3 weeks ago, maybe 4. A shipment had been intercepted by the feds, 2 million in untraceable pharmaceuticals gone. He'd come home in a black fury, looking for something, anything to control when his empire felt like it was slipping through his fingers. She'd been in his study, dusting, and she'd knocked over a small jade figurine his mother had given him before she died. It hadn't even broken. Just tipped over, rolling across the mahogany desk. He'd erupted. Get out. His voice had been ice and razors. You're done. I want you gone within the hour. She'd stood there, cloth still in her hand, and said only, I'm sorry, sir. Her voice had been hollow. Dead. Like she'd expected this or worse. Like she was already somewhere else entirely. He'd been too angry to notice the circles under her eyes. The way her uniform hung loose like she'd lost weight. The tiny tremor in her hands that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with exhaustion so deep it had carved itself into her bones. Now, kneeling in the snow beside her dying body, Jae-Hoon saw everything he'd missed. The knife scar peeking from her collarbone, thin and white and deliberately placed. The defensive wounds on her forearms, faded but unmistakable. The way she clutched that photograph like it was the only thing tethering her to life. This woman wasn't just poor. She wasn't just desperate. She was running. "What the hell are you doing out here, Regina?" he whispered, more to himself than to her. "What are you running from?" He shrugged out of his cashmere overcoat and wrapped it around her carefully, lifting her slight frame into his arms. She barely weighed anything. He could feel every rib, every sharp angle. The coat swallowed her whole, expensive fabric pooling around her unconscious form. His phone was out before he'd fully stood, thumb already scrolling. Not 911. Never 911. The moment they logged her name, she'd be in the system, traceable, vulnerable to whoever was hunting her. And someone was hunting her. He'd stake his reputation on it. "Dr. Yoon," he said when the line picked up on the first ring. Korean flowed from his lips, faster and more urgent than his usual measured cadence. "I need you at the penthouse. Now." "Hypothermia case, female, late 20s, unconscious. Possible malnutrition. I don't know what else. No hospital. No records. You understand?" Pause. Then, 20 minutes. Keep her warm. Don't let her warm up too fast, that can stop the heart. Jae-Hoon was already walking toward the street where his Maybach waited, black and sleek and nearly invisible in the darkness. His driver, Minho, took one look at his boss carrying an unconscious woman and simply opened the back door without a word. "Penthouse." Fast but smooth. No jarring. "Yes, sir." Jae-Hoon settled into the back seat with Regina cradled against his chest. In the warm interior of the car, he could finally see her properly. Snow melted in her hair, dripping onto the leather seat. Her lips were still blue. Her breathing was so shallow he had to press his ear close to her mouth to confirm she was still pulling air. The engine purred to life, and they glided into the empty Manhattan streets. Streetlights streaked past the tinted windows, turning the city into an impressionist painting of gold and shadow. Jae-Hoon found himself unable to look away from her face. He'd built an empire on reading people. On seeing the angle, the weakness, the lie beneath the lie. But Regina had been invisible to him. Just another employee, quiet and efficient and forgettable. He'd never asked why a woman with her intelligence was cleaning toilets. Never wondered why she flinched when he moved too quickly. Never questioned the way she volunteered for night shifts, always leaving just before dawn, never staying a moment longer than necessary. She'd been hiding in plain sight. And he'd been too buried in his own wars to notice. The photograph had fallen from her grip, landing face up on the seat beside them. That girl's smile, so full of hope despite the oxygen mask, despite the cancer eating her alive. Regina had been doing this for her. All of it. The degrading work, the terrible hours, the poverty that forced her to choose between rent and medicine. And when he'd fired her, he'd taken away her last lifeline. "Tonight the city forced me to see what I've spent years ignoring," he murmured, his fingers brushing a strand of wet hair from her forehead. The gesture was unbearably gentle, at odds with everything he was supposed to be. "And now I can't look away." Her eyelids fluttered. For a moment he thought she might wake. But she only turned her face into his chest, unconscious mind seeking warmth, and released a small broken sound that made something crack in the fortress of his ribs. "Whatever you're hiding," he continued, voice dropping to barely a whisper, "it's bigger than both of us. I can feel it." The Maybach turned onto Fifth Avenue, heading toward the exclusive high-rise where Jae-Hoon kept his primary residence. Through the window, he watched the city slide past. His city, the empire he'd built from blood and calculation and ruthless ambition. And somehow, in his arms, this woman had become the most dangerous thing in it. Dr. Yoon arrived in 18 minutes, carrying a medical bag that could stock a small emergency room. He was a slight man in his 60s, wire-rimmed glasses perched on a nose broken twice in his youth, before he'd traded gang colors for a medical degree. He asked no questions as he worked, checking vitals, starting in 4, wrapping heated blankets around Regina's shivering form. "Severe hypothermia," he confirmed, his Korean curt and clinical. "Another hour and she'd be dead. Blood sugar is dangerously low. Signs of chronic malnutrition. Multiple old injuries poorly healed. This woman has been suffering for a long time." Jae-Hoon stood by the window of the guest bedroom, hands clasped behind his back, watching the doctor work. Will she recover? Physically? Yes. With proper care and nutrition. But these, Dr. Yoon gestured to the scars on Regina's arms, the fading bruises he'd uncovered. These tell a different story. Someone has been hurting her. Regularly. I know. Do you know who? Not yet. Jae-Hoon's voice carried a promise that would have made wiser men nervous. But I will. Dr. Yoon packed his instruments with practiced efficiency. She should wake in a few hours. Keep her hydrated. Nothing too rich at first, her system needs to adjust. I'll come back tomorrow to check on her. After the doctor left, Jae-Hoon pulled a chair close to the bed and sat. The penthouse was silent around him, 30 floors above the city's chaos. Up here, the only sounds were the whisper of the heating system and Regina's slowly steadying breath. He picked up the hospital bill from where he'd set it on the nightstand. Pulled out his phone. Made a call. Kong. I need you to handle something. Mount Sinai Medical Center, patient Destiny Matthews. There's an outstanding balance. Pay it in full. Tonight. A pause on the other end. The amount. All of it. Whatever it takes. And make sure her treatment continues. Best doctors. Private room. Send the bills to me directly. Understood, boss. Anything else? Jae-Hoon looked at the eviction notice. Find out where Regina Matthews was living. I want that apartment secured. Rent paid for a year. And... He hesitated, something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Find out who she's running from. I'll have information by morning. The call ended. Jae-Hoon sat back in the chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin, and watched Regina sleep. Color was slowly returning to her face, the blue tinge fading from her lips. In rest she looked younger. Vulnerable. But there was steel in the set of her jaw, even unconscious. A woman who'd survived things that should have broken her. You're going to wake up soon, he said quietly, and you're going to have questions. I have some answers. And a proposal. Outside, the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky. Somewhere in the city, enemies were plotting. Money was moving through dark channels. Violence was being planned in rooms that smelled of cigarette smoke and fear. But in this moment, in this room, there was only the steady rhythm of breathing and the weight of a decision that would change everything. Jae-Hoon had built his empire on cold calculation. On emotional distance. On never, ever letting anyone close enough to matter. But something about finding Regina in that park, clutching a picture of her dying sister with frozen fingers, had shattered a wall he didn't know he'd built. And now he was going to do something profoundly stupid. He was going to care. Regina's eyes opened 4 hours later, just as weak sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows. For a moment she didn't move, didn't even breathe. Just lay perfectly still, assessing. Soft mattress beneath her. Silk sheets, cool and expensive. The scent of cedar and something else. Korean incense, bergamot soap, the faint ghost of expensive cologne. Her heart kicked into overdrive. She sat up fast, too fast, and the room spun. Strong hands caught her shoulders, steadying her. Easy. You're safe. That voice. She knew that voice. Regina's gaze snapped to the man sitting beside the bed, and her stomach dropped through the floor. Jae-Hoon Park. Her former boss. The man who'd fired her with ice in his voice and not a flicker of remorse in those dark, unreadable eyes. The man whose world she knew was built on blood money and barely controlled violence. Mr. Park. Her voice came out as a rasp. Her throat felt like sandpaper. What, where? He poured water from a crystal carafe into a glass and offered it to her. Drink first. Then we'll talk. Every instinct screamed at her to run. But her body was weak, shaking, and the water looked like salvation. She took the glass with trembling hands and drank deeply, feeling life flow back into her veins. When the glass was empty, she set it down and met his gaze. You found me. I found you dying in Central Park. His tone was neutral, but something flickered behind his eyes. You were minutes from freezing to death. The memories came flooding back. The cold. The way her body had stopped shivering, stopped feeling anything at all. The strange peace that had crept over her as consciousness slipped away. She thought she was dying. Part of her had welcomed it. Why am I here? She asked. Why didn't you just leave me there? Call 911? Because 911 would have put you in a system. And I think you're trying very hard to stay out of systems. He leaned back in his chair, suit immaculate even at dawn, every line of his body controlled. I also paid your sister's hospital bill. All of it. Her treatment will continue. Regina's breath caught. You, what? Destiny Matthews. Stage 3 lymphoma. Mount Sinai. She'll have the best oncologists in the city. Private room. Whatever she needs. Tears sprang to Regina's eyes without permission. Why would you do that? You fired me. You hated me. I didn't hate you. For the first time, something like regret crossed his features. I was angry about something that had nothing to do with you and I took it out on you. That was wrong. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But Regina had learned the hard way that men like Jae-Hoon Park didn't do anything without a reason. Without a price. What do you want? She asked, forcing steel into her voice. Men like you don't save women like me out of the goodness of your hearts. So what's the catch? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Smart. Good. You'll need that. He stood, walking to the window, hands in his pockets. Against the Manhattan skyline, he looked like a king surveying his kingdom. I want you to work for me again. Not as a maid. As my personal aide. House manager. You'll live here in the penthouse. Private quarters. Salary of $150,000 a year, plus benefits. Regina's mind reeled. That kind of money would change everything. Pay off debts. Secure Destiny's future. Give them both a chance at something resembling a normal life. But nothing in this world was free. And in exchange, she pressed. Jae-Hoon turned to face her, and his expression was carved from stone. Absolute silence about anything you see, hear, or learn in this household. My business associates. My phone calls. The people who come and go. You will speak of it to no one. Ever. And if I do? Then the consequences will be severe and final. He said it without malice, just fact. I'm offering you protection, Regina. Safety. A way out of whatever hell you've been living in. But I need to know you understand the terms. My world is dangerous. If you're in it completely. No half measures. She should say no. Should run as far and as fast as her weakened legs would carry her. This man was everything dangerous. A criminal, a killer, someone who operated in shadows and blood. But Darius was out there. Darius, who knew where Destiny was hospitalized. Who'd already sent those text messages, those photos, those promises of violence if Regina didn't come back to him. Darius, who'd killed before and would kill again. At least with Jae-Hoon, the danger was honest. There's something you need to know, Regina said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. About why I was hiding. Jae-Hoon returned to his chair, giving her his full attention. I'm listening. And so, as morning light filled the penthouse and the city woke below them, Regina told him about Darius. About the years of violence, the escalating threats, the night she'd witnessed him murder an associate in cold blood over a deal gone wrong. About the video on her phone that she'd copied to 3 different cloud accounts, insurance she'd thought would keep her alive. About the way Darius had promised in his last text message, that if she didn't come back to him, he'd put a bullet in her baby sister's head while she slept. Jae-Hoon listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When she finished, the silence stretched for a long moment. Then he said, Darius Webb. Enforcer for the Carter Syndicate. Brooklyn territory. Regina's eyes widened. You know him? Of him. We've crossed paths. Something deadly entered Jae-Hoon's voice. He's connected to some people I'm currently having disagreements with. I didn't mean to bring my problems to your door, Regina said quickly. If this is going to cause trouble for you, you didn't bring your problems to my door. I brought you here. Jae-Hoon stood, buttoning his suit jacket with precise movements. Darius Webb is now my problem. And I'm very good at solving problems. The way he said it made Regina's blood run cold and warm all at once. So, he continued, extending his hand, do we have an agreement? $150,000 a year. Protection. Silence. And you stay alive. Regina looked at his offered hand. At the man who'd saved her life, who'd paid for Destiny's treatment, who now stood between her and the monster who'd haunted her nightmares for years. She reached out and clasped his hand. His grip was warm, firm, certain. We have an agreement. The penthouse was a study in controlled luxury. Everything whispered of money so old it didn't need to shout, from the original artwork on the walls to the hand-woven Korean silk rugs to the view that stretched from the Hudson River to the East River, Manhattan spread out like a glittering toy kingdom below. Regina's private quarters were larger than any apartment she'd ever rented. A bedroom with a king bed dressed in Italian linens. A marble bathroom with a soaking tub. A small sitting room with built-in bookshelves and a window seat that overlooked Central Park. The same park where she'd nearly died 3 days ago. She spent the first 2 days recovering, eating the carefully prepared meals that appeared like clockwork, delivered by a silent Korean woman named Mrs. Han who ran the kitchen with military precision. Bone broth. Steamed vegetables. Grilled fish. Nothing heavy, nothing that would shock her system, but all of it delicious and served on porcelain so fine she was afraid to hold it too tightly. On the 3rd day, Jae-Hoon summoned her to his study. She found him behind a massive mahogany desk, surrounded by monitors displaying financial data, security camera feeds, and what looked like shipping manifests. He was on the phone, speaking rapid Korean, his tone sharp enough to cut. When he saw her, he held up one finger, wait, and continued his conversation. Regina stood just inside the doorway taking in details. The way his jacket hung on the back of his chair, revealing the shoulder holster beneath. The faint scar along his jaw that she'd never noticed before. The way his free hand drummed a precise rhythm on the desk. Not nervous energy but controlled thought, like a predator calculating its next move. He ended the call with what sounded like a curt command and set the phone down. Sit. She took the chair across from him, spine straight, hands folded in her lap. Old habits from her grandmother's teaching. Never slouch in a man's office. Never let them see you small. Jae-Hoon studied her for a moment, then slid a thick document across the desk. Your contract. Read it carefully. Sign only if you understand everything. Regina picked up the contract and began to read. It was thorough. Terrifyingly thorough. Non-disclosure agreements that extended beyond her death. Clauses about electronic communication monitoring. Specific protocols for visitors, phone calls, leaving the penthouse. And buried in the middle, a paragraph that made her pause. Employee acknowledges that the nature of employer's business activities may involve legal ambiguity and potential danger. Employee agrees to report any suspicious activities, threats, or breaches of security directly and immediately to employer. Failure to do so may result in immediate termination and legal consequences. She looked up. You want me to spy for you. I want you to survive, he corrected. This world has rules. Break them and people die. I need eyes and ears I can trust, especially now. If someone in my organization is working against me, they'll likely target you to get to me. This clause protects us both. Regina thought about that. About the careful way he'd phrased it. You think someone in your organization is betraying you. Jae-Hoon's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Approval maybe. I think money has gone missing. Shipments have been intercepted. And the only people who knew those details are part of my inner circle. And you're telling me this because? Because you're not part of that circle. You have no loyalty to anyone here except yourself and your sister. That makes you the most trustworthy person in this building. It was a profoundly cynical worldview and also probably accurate. Regina signed the contract. Her first week as Jae-Hoon's personal aide was a crash course in organized crime management disguised as household administration. She managed his calendar, which meant learning the code names for various illegal enterprises. Sunrise meeting meant arms deals. Garden consultation meant drug trafficking discussions. Art acquisition meant money laundering logistics. She organized his files, which meant seeing financial records for restaurants that didn't exist, shipping companies with ghost employees, real estate deals involving properties that were little more than vacant lots. She learned the names of his key associates. Kang, his head of security, a stone-faced former North Korean defector who moved like violence compressed into human form. Minho, the driver who'd been with Jae-Hoon since he'd first arrived in America. Sungmin, his lieutenant, smooth-talking and charming in a way that made Regina's skin crawl. And she learned Jae-Hoon's routines. How he rose at 5 every morning to practice taekwondo in the private gym, his movements precise and lethal. How he took his coffee black with 1 sugar, but only Korean sugar, a specific brand his mother had used. How he worked until 2 or 3 in the morning most nights, the only light in the penthouse coming from his study. How he was always alone. Late one night, unable to sleep, Regina wandered into the kitchen for water. She found Mrs. Han still awake, preparing what looked like a traditional Korean breakfast spread even though it was nearly midnight. For Mr. Park, the older woman said in accented English. He works all night, forgets to eat. I make sure there is food. Regina watched her work, the careful arrangement of banchan side dishes, the precisely measured rice, the soup that simmered with complex flavors. How long have you worked for him? 15 years. Since he was just a boy with big anger and no family. Mrs. Han's hands moved with practiced grace, folding dumpling wrappers. I knew his mother and soul. Before. Before what? The older woman's face closed. Before the violence took her. Before it took everything. Regina absorbed that. He lost his mother young. He lost everyone young. Mrs. Han set down her knife, finally meeting Regina's eyes. You seem like good girl. Work hard, keep your head down, don't ask too many questions. This is not a safe world for curious people. It was a warning wrapped in kindness and Regina recognized it for what it was. But curiosity, as it turned out, wasn't something she could simply turn off. It started with small inconsistencies. A phone call Jae-Hoon took in his study, the door slightly ajar. Regina had been walking past with fresh linens, not deliberately eavesdropping but Korean words filtered out, heated, urgent. She recognized only a few from the basic phrases Jae-Hoon had been teaching her during their late-night tea sessions. Where did the money go? Pause. Then lower, more dangerous. Who is betraying me? She'd kept walking, pulse hammering, but the words haunted her. Then there were the ledgers. She'd been reorganizing Jae-Hoon's desk, a task he'd specifically requested, saying he needed a system he could navigate at a glance, when she noticed discrepancies in the financial records left open on his computer. She wasn't an accountant, but her grandmother had run a small restaurant for 30 years, and Regina had learned young how to spot when numbers didn't tell the story they were supposed to. 3 separate transactions, each for exactly $1.7 million, all marked as equipment purchases for the same restaurant. But the dates overlapped and the invoices were signed by different people. She'd said nothing. Closed the ledgers. Finished organizing. But she'd memorized the dates and amounts. And then there was Sungmin. Jae-Hoon's lieutenant visited the penthouse frequently, always impeccably dressed, always wearing a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He was courteous to Regina, almost charming, but there was something performative about it. Like he was playing a role. One evening he'd arrived for a meeting while Jae-Hoon was still in the shower. Regina had shown him to the study as instructed, offered him tea and left him alone. But she'd forgotten her phone in the study. When she returned to retrieve it, quietly not wanting to disturb him if he'd started working, she'd found him at Jae-Hoon's computer, fingers flying over the keyboard, downloading something onto a USB drive. He'd looked up, seen her standing there and smiled. That same charming, empty smile. Just grabbing some files your boss asked for, he'd said smoothly, pocketing the drive. Don't want to waste his time when he comes down. Regina had nodded, grabbed her phone and left. But Jae-Hoon hadn't mentioned asking Sungmin to pull any files. And the way the man had palmed that USB drive, quick, practiced, guilty, told her everything she needed to know. Someone was stealing from Jae-Hoon Park. And that someone was probably about to get very, very dead. She waited until late that night, when the penthouse was quiet and Jae-Hoon was alone in his study. Regina had learned his patterns. Between midnight and 2 a.m., he did his most sensitive work. No interruptions. No calls. Just him and whatever problems he was trying to solve. She knocked softly on the study door. Come in. He was at his desk, shirt sleeves rolled up, tie discarded, papers spread around him like a crime scene. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, jaw tight with tension. I need to tell you something, Regina said without preamble. And I don't think you're going to like it. Jae-Hoon set down his pen and gave her his full attention. Go ahead. She told him about the overlapping transactions. About the Korean phone conversation she'd partially overheard. About finding Sungmin at his computer. With each detail, Jae-Hoon's expression grew more still, more dangerous. By the time she finished, the temperature in the room felt like it had dropped 10 degrees. How long have you been watching Sungmin? He asked quietly. I wasn't watching him specifically. I just noticed things. Inconsistencies. And you waited 4 days to tell me why? Regina met his gaze steadily. Because I wanted to be sure. Because accusing your second-in-command of theft seems like the kind of thing that could get me killed if I'm wrong. And because I wanted to see if there were any other patterns I was missing. Something that might have been respect flickered across his features. Were there? Yes. She pulled out her phone, showed him the notes she'd been keeping. Dates. Times. Amounts. Visitors who'd come to the building. Someone's been bleeding you for months, maybe longer. Small amounts at first. Then bigger. They're getting bolder. Jae-Hoon studied her notes in silence. When he looked up, his expression was unreadable. You could have stayed quiet. Kept your head down like Mrs. Han suggested. How did you? I have cameras everywhere, Regina. Including the kitchen. He stood, circling the desk to lean against it, arms crossed. So why didn't you? Why risk telling me this? Because you saved my life, she wanted to say. Because you paid for my sister's treatment. Because despite everything terrifying about you, you've shown me more basic human decency than anyone else has in years. Instead, she said simply, because it's my job. You hired me to manage your household and watch for threats. This is a threat. Jae-Hoon studied her for a long moment, dark eyes unreadable in the dim light. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. A real smile, small but genuine. You're going to be dangerous, he said softly. I'm starting to realize that. Regina felt heat rise to her cheeks and looked away. What are you going to do about Sungmin? Nothing. Yet. Jae-Hoon returned to his chair, but his posture had changed. Less exhausted, more predatory. If I act now, whoever's working with him will scatter. I need to know the full extent of the betrayal before I move. So we wait. We wait. We watch. And you, he pointed at her with his pen, you keep doing exactly what you've been doing. Notice things. Tell me what you see. But be careful. If Sungmin realizes you're on to him, he'll eliminate you without hesitation. The casual way he said it made Regina's stomach turn. But he wasn't wrong. Understood. As she turned to leave, Jae-Hoon's voice stopped her. Regina? She looked back. Thank you. He said it quietly with what sounded like genuine gratitude. Not many people would have told me. They would have looked the other way, kept themselves safe. Maybe I'm just stupid, she said lightly. No. His gaze held hers. You're loyal. That's different. And in my world, it's rarer than gold. Later, lying in her bed, staring at the ceiling, Regina wondered what exactly she'd gotten herself into. She'd thought working for Jae-Hoon would be simple. Keep her head down, stay quiet, collect a paycheck, keep destiny safe. But somewhere between the late-night Korean lessons over tea, the way he listened when she talked about her family, the quiet intensity of his presence, and the dangerous game of cat and mouse they were now playing together, simple had become complicated. And complicated, in Jae-Hoon Park's world, was another word for lethal. The next 2 weeks passed in careful tension. Regina continued her duties, hyper-aware of every movement, every conversation, every face that passed through the penthouse. She watched Sungmin like a hawk disguised as a dove. Noticed how his visits became more frequent. How he always found excuses to be alone in Jae-Hoon's study. How his eyes tracked her when he thought she wasn't looking, calculating, measuring, wondering how much she knew. And in the quiet hours after midnight, when the penthouse felt like a ship floating above the sleeping city, she and Jae-Hoon fell into a rhythm that felt dangerously close to something she couldn't name. He taught her Korean over tea. Corrected her pronunciation with patient repetition, his accent wrapping around the syllables like silk. She taught him about her grandmother's recipes, the way food could be love made tangible, and watched something soften in his eyes when she talked about Sunday dinners that lasted for hours. She started humming old gospel songs while she worked. His eye is on the sparrow, Amazing Grace, half-conscious prayers that her grandmother had sung in their tiny Brooklyn kitchen. Jae-Hoon never commented, but sometimes she'd catch him pausing in his work to listen, head tilted slightly, as if trying to understand the faith woven into the melodies. They were circling each other. She knew it. He knew it. Neither acknowledged it. Because acknowledgement would mean confronting what was building between them. Something that had no place in a world built on violence and control and carefully maintained emotional distance. But on the 15th night, as February snow began to fall over Manhattan and gospel hummed quiet in Regina's throat, everything changed. Jae-Hoon had asked her to organize the basement archive, a climate-controlled vault where he kept old contracts, financial records, and documents dating back to when he'd first established his American operations 15 years ago. Start with the oldest files, he'd instructed. I need everything digitized and cross-referenced. It'll take weeks, but I need someone I trust. Regina had understood the subtext. I need you where Sungmin won't think to look. The basement was silent except for the whisper of the ventilation system. Rows of filing cabinets lined the walls, each drawer meticulously labeled in Korean and English. Regina worked methodically, scanning documents, creating digital files, organizing everything into the database Jae-Hoon had set up. It was tedious work. Mind-numbing even. Which was probably why she almost missed it. A folder labeled, Equipment Purchases 2023 caught her eye, the same category where she'd spotted the discrepancies weeks earlier. She pulled it, more from habit than suspicion, and began scanning the invoices inside. Standard purchase orders. Shipping manifests. Receipts for restaurant equipment, most of it legitimate. Then she found the page that didn't belong. It was tucked between two invoices easy to miss. A bank transfer authorization, signed by Jae-Hoon Park, authorizing $5 million to be moved from his primary operating account to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Except the signature was wrong. Regina had seen Jae-Hoon's signature dozens of times by now, the particular way he formed the J, the sharp angles of his Korean name beneath it. This signature was close. Very close. But the pressure was different. The flow slightly off. Her hands started shaking. She pulled out her phone and photographed the document from every angle, then kept digging. Found 3 more identical authorizations, all dated within the last 6 months, all for exactly $5 million, all bearing that same almost right signature. $20 million. Gone. Stolen using forged documents that would hold up to casual inspection but crumble under scrutiny. Regina was about to close the folder when she saw the notation at the bottom of the last authorization. A single line of Korean characters followed by a name. She couldn't read the Korean, but the name was crystal clear. Sungmin Lee. And beside it, in handwriting she didn't recognize, D. Webb, Brooklyn shipment confirmed. D. Webb. Darius Webb. The filing cabinet suddenly felt like it was closing in on her. The temperature in the basement seemed to drop. Regina's breath came faster, pulse hammering in her ears. Sungmin wasn't just stealing from Jae-Hoon. He was working with Darius. Which meant this was never just about money. This was personal. This was about her, about using her past to destroy Jae-Hoon's empire from the inside. She'd led the wolf straight to the door. Regina took the stairs two at a time, the photographed documents burning in her phone like evidence of her own complicity. It was past 2 in the morning, but light still glowed from beneath Jae-Hoon's study door. She didn't knock. Just pushed the door open and stepped inside, breathing hard. Jae-Hoon looked up from his desk, saw her face and was on his feet instantly. What happened? I found it. She crossed to his desk, hands trembling as she pulled up the photos on her phone. The proof. All of it. Sungmin has been embezzling for at least 6 months. $20 million, maybe more. Forged signatures on offshore transfers. Jae-Hoon took her phone, studying each image with an expression that grew progressively more deadly. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet with each swipe. There's more, Regina said, her voice shaking. The last transfer has a notation. Sungmin's name and Darius Webb's. They're working together. Jae-Hoon's head snapped up. What? They're collaborating. I don't know the full extent, but Darius's name is right there, connected to a Brooklyn shipment. For a long moment, Jae-Hoon said nothing. He just stared at the phone, jaw working, the muscles in his neck standing out like cables. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. Terrifyingly soft. He's been planning this for months. Using you to get to me. I didn't, Regina started, but he cut her off. I know you didn't. But they saw you as leverage. A way to destabilize me. He set the phone down carefully, precisely like a weapon. Sungmin would know about Darius's connection to you. Would know that bringing you into my household would create vulnerability. So what do we do? Jae-Hoon moved to the window, staring out at the city below. Snow was falling thicker now, blanketing Manhattan in white silence. When he turned back, his expression was carved from ice. I expose him. At tomorrow's Syndicate meeting. In front of everyone. That's dangerous, Regina said. If he's planning a coup. Then we force his hand before he's ready. Jae-Hoon's smile was blade-thin. He thinks I'm blind. Thinks I don't know. That gives me the element of surprise. Regina's stomach nodded. She'd seen enough crime dramas to know how these things ended. People are going to die. Yes. He said it without hesitation. Without apology. This is what my world looks like, Regina. This is what you signed up for when you took my offer. She wanted to argue. Wanted to find another way. But she knew there wasn't one. In Jae-Hoon's world, betrayal had only one price. What do you need from me? She asked instead. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or respect. Tomorrow you stay here. Lock the doors. Don't let anyone in except me or Kong. If anything goes wrong. Nothing's going to go wrong. If anything goes wrong, he continued, there's a safe in my bedroom closet. Code is your sister's birthday. Inside is cash, passports, and a phone number. Call it. They'll get you and Destiny out of the country. Regina's throat tightened. You're planning for failure. I'm planning for every contingency. That's how you survive. He crossed to her, and for the first time since she'd known him, he reached out and touched her face. Just a brief contact, his fingers warm against her cheek. You did good tonight. You may have saved my life. Then don't throw it away tomorrow. His smile was sad. I'll try. But before she could leave, Jae-Hoon spoke again. Regina. Wait. She turned back. He was standing by his desk, one hand braced against the mahogany surface, and in the low light he looked almost vulnerable. Almost human beneath the armor of expensive suits and controlled violence. There's something I should tell you, he said quietly. About why I kept you close even before I knew about the embezzlement. Regina's heart kicked. The cameras in the warehouse. Yes. I knew you were squatting there weeks before I fired you. I watched you come and go every night, watched you choose between sleep and visiting your sister. I knew exactly how desperate you were. She should have been angry. Should have felt violated. Instead she just felt tired. So this was all manipulation from the start. No. He looked up, and his eyes were honest in a way she hadn't seen before. At first, yes. You were a variable I needed to control. Someone who might have seen or heard things she shouldn't have. But then I found you in that park and everything changed. Why? Because you were clutching that photo of your sister like it was the only thing keeping you alive. Because you'd literally chosen death by hypothermia over going back to someone who hurt you. Because when I brought you here and offered you safety, you didn't take it blindly, you asked what it would cost. He moved closer and Regina found she couldn't look away. I've spent 15 years building walls, Regina. Keeping everyone at arm's length because closeness means vulnerability, and vulnerability means death. But you walked through those walls like they weren't even there. I'm your employee, she whispered. That's all. Is it? His voice dropped lower, intimate. Then why do I find myself teaching you Korean at midnight? Why do I listen for the sound of you humming in the hallways? Why does the thought of Darius Webb putting his hands on you make me want to burn Brooklyn to the ground? Regina's breath caught. The air between them felt charged, electric, dangerous in an entirely different way. You saved my life, she managed. I'm grateful. That's all this is. Liar. But he said it gently without accusation. We're both liars, I think. Telling ourselves this is just business when we both know it stopped being business the moment I wrapped my coat around you in the snow. He was too close now. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, could see the faint scar along his jaw, could feel the heat radiating from his body. Close enough that when he raised his hand to her face again, she didn't step back. Tomorrow is going to be dangerous, he said softly, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. I need you to know that if something happens to me, Kong has instructions to protect you and your sister. No matter what. You're not alone anymore. Nothing's going to happen to you, Regina said fiercely. You're going to walk into that meeting, expose Sungmin and walk back out. Because I didn't survive Darius just to lose you to your own lieutenant. Something blazed in Jae-Hoon's eyes. You're worried about me. Of course I'm worried about you, you arrogant. He kissed her. It was brief, gentle, nothing like the violence she knew he was capable of. Just a soft press of lips, a moment of connection that felt like a promise and a prayer and a confession all at once. When he pulled back, Regina was shaking. I'm sorry, Jae-Hoon said, though he didn't sound sorry at all. I shouldn't have. Shut up. She grabbed his tie and pulled him back down, kissing him properly this time. Harder. Deeper. Pouring all her fear and anger and unexpected hope into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jae-Hoon rested his forehead against hers. I'm going to survive tomorrow, he murmured in Korean then English, because I have something to come home to now. You'd better, Regina whispered. Or I'm going to kill you myself. His laugh was soft and genuine, and it was the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. They stood there for a long moment, neither quite willing to let go, both knowing they should. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the city in temporary peace. Finally, Jae-Hoon stepped back, his hand trailing down her arm to briefly clasp her fingers. You should sleep. Tomorrow will be difficult. So should you. I don't sleep well anymore. Haven't in years. Regina saw it then, the shadows behind his eyes, the weight he carried that had nothing to do with Syndicate business and everything to do with ghosts he couldn't outrun. Tell me, she said softly. About Seoul. About what happened to your mother. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. That he'd retreat behind the walls he'd built so carefully. But then he sank into his desk chair, suddenly looking exhausted, and gestured to the seat across from him. It's not a pretty story. The best ones never are. Jae-Hoon was quiet for a moment, staring at his hands. When he spoke, his voice was distant, colored by memory and old grief. I was 16. We lived in Gangnam, my mother, my younger sister Minji and me. My father had died when I was 12, and my mother worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. She cleaned offices at night, worked in a restaurant during the day, took in sewing on weekends. She was the strongest person I've ever known. He paused, jaw working. There was a gang in our neighborhood. Small time but vicious. They ran protection rackets, drugs, prostitution. My mother refused to pay them. Said she'd worked too hard for her money to give it to thugs. So they made an example of her. Regina's chest tightened. She knew where this was going, could feel the tragedy building like a wave. They broke into our apartment while Minji and I were at school. When we came home. His voice cracked just slightly. They'd beaten her so badly we couldn't recognize her face. The police did nothing. Said it was gang business, not their problem. So I handled it myself. You were 16, Regina whispered. Old enough to understand revenge. Old enough to know how to find the men who'd killed her. His eyes met hers and they were full of old darkness. I joined a rival gang. Worked my way up. Learned everything I could about violence, about power, about how to make men afraid. And then I killed every single person who'd touched my mother. One by one. Made sure they knew exactly why they were dying. And your sister? Pain flickered across his face. Minji couldn't handle what I'd become. What I'd done. She OD'd on heroin 6 months later. 13 years old. I found her in the bathroom with the needle still in her arm. Oh, Jae-Hoon. Don't. He held up a hand. Don't pity me. I made my choices. I became the thing I hated because I thought that's what strength looked like. And it cost me the only family I had left. That's not what happened, Regina said firmly. The gang cost you your family. The violence. Not you. I perpetuated it. You were a child trying to survive. Jae-Hoon looked at her for a long moment, something raw and unguarded in his expression. How do you do that? How do you look at what I am and still see something worth defending? Because I know what it's like to make impossible choices, Regina said. I stayed with Darius for 3 years because I thought that was the only way to keep Destiny safe. I let him hurt me because the alternative was him hurting her. So don't talk to me about becoming things you hate. We've all got blood on our hands, Jae-Hoon. The only difference is whether we let it define us or whether we use it to build something better. He stood slowly, moved around the desk and pulled her to her feet. This time when he cupped her face, his hands were shaking slightly. You terrify me, he said softly. Because for the first time in 15 years I care whether I live or die. And that makes me vulnerable in ways I can't afford. Good, Regina said. Vulnerability is how you know you're still human. In my world, being human gets you killed. Then maybe, she said, rising on her toes to press a soft kiss to his jaw, it's time to build a different world. They talked until dawn, sharing pieces of themselves they'd kept locked away. Jae-Hoon told her about arriving in New York at 17 with nothing but vengeance and ambition, about building his empire one calculated risk at a time, about the loneliness of being feared by everyone and known by no one. Regina told him about her father, a kind man who died when she was 12 in what was ruled a random mugging but what she'd always suspected was something more deliberate. About her mother's descent into depression and alcohol afterward. About raising Destiny herself from age 15, becoming mother and sister and best friend all at once. About the first time Darius hit her, how he'd apologized with tears in his eyes and promised it would never happen again. About the 100 times after that when it did happen, each time a little worse, until she stopped being able to remember who she'd been before the fear. I should have left earlier, she said. Should have been stronger. You did leave, Jae-Hoon pointed out. You chose hypothermia over going back to him. That's not weakness, Regina. That's warrior strength. Warrior strength, she repeated, testing the words. My grandmother used to say that. You got warrior blood, baby girl. Don't you ever forget it. She was right. His fingers threaded through hers, the contact casual now comfortable. You've survived things that would have broken most people. That makes you more dangerous than any gun I carry. As the first light of dawn began to color the sky, Jae-Hoon walked her to her quarters. At her door he hesitated. Tomorrow, he said, when I go to that meeting? Tonight, Regina corrected, checking her phone. It's already tomorrow. A ghost of a smile. Tonight then. When I go to that meeting, I need you to promise me something. What? If Kong tells you to run, you run. No questions. No hesitation. You trust him and you run. I'm not leaving you. Regina. No. She pressed a finger to his lips. We're past that now. You don't get to save me and then expect me to abandon you when things get dangerous. That's not how this works. Then how does this work? He asked against her finger. We survive together. Both of us. All of us. That's the only option I'm accepting. Jae-Hoon caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. You're going to give me a heart attack before Sungmin gets the chance. Good. Keeps you sharp. She smiled, but it faded quickly. Come back to me tonight, Jae-Hoon. Please. I will. He said it like a vow. I promise. He kissed her one more time, slow, deep, tasting like goodbye even though neither of them would admit it, and then he was gone, disappearing into his own quarters to prepare for war. Regina closed her door and leaned against it, hand pressed to her racing heart. Somewhere in the city, Sungmin was planning his coup. Darius was hunting. Enemies were circling. And she'd just fallen in love with the most dangerous man in New York. The meeting was set for 8 p.m. at the Pearl Dragon, an upscale Korean restaurant in Koreatown that served as neutral territory for Syndicate business. Jae-Hoon left the penthouse at 7, immaculate in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Regina's first car, his expression carved from stone. "Lock the doors," he reminded her. "Kong is stationed outside. Don't let anyone in. I know the drill." He cupped her face one last time, thumb brushing her cheekbone. "See you in a few hours." Then he was gone, and Regina was left alone in the vast penthouse with nothing but her racing thoughts and the sound of the city humming 40 floors below. She tried to distract herself. Cleaned the already spotless kitchen. Reorganized her closet. Called the hospital to check on Destiny, who was sleeping peacefully after her latest treatment. But the minutes crawled by like hours, and fear sat in her stomach like a stone. At 8:47 p.m. her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her hand shook as she opened the message. It was a photo. Destiny. In her hospital bed. Eyes closed, for in her arm, oxygen tubes in her nose. And superimposed over her chest, crystal clear and unmistakable, was a red laser dot. The caption read, "Your boss is about to have a very bad night. So are you. Stay by your phone." Regina's scream died in her throat, coming out as a choked gasp. She dialed Jae-Hoon immediately. No answer. She tried again. And again. Nothing. Kong? She ran to the door, yanked it open. The Korean man was already there, hand on his gun. "Someone's at the hospital. Threatening Destiny. I need to get to her, I need." "You're not going anywhere," Kong said firmly. "Mr. Park's orders. You stay here, I keep you safe. My sister is going to die. Your sister has 4 armed guards around her room that Mr. Park hired 3 weeks ago. She's safer than you are right now." Regina blinked. "What?" "He anticipated this," Kong said. "Hired private security for your sister the day you moved in. She's protected." Relief and terror warred in her chest. "Then what's happening at the restaurant?" Kang's expression darkened. "A war." At the Pearl Dragon, Jae-Hoon sat at the head of the long table in the private dining room, surrounded by the 7 men who comprised his inner circle. The room was opulent. Silk wallpaper, crystal chandeliers, artwork that cost more than most people made in a decade. Wine flowed. Dishes appeared and disappeared. Surface-level conversation floated around the table like smoke. But everyone could feel the tension underneath. Sung-min sat 3 seats down, perfectly composed, sipping his wine like he didn't have a care in the world. But Jae-Hoon had spent 15 years learning to read men, and he saw the tells. The way Sung-min's eyes kept flicking to the door. The micro-tension in his shoulders. The barely there tremor in his left hand. Guilty. Afraid. Waiting for his moment. Jae-Hoon let the dinner proceed normally through the first 3 courses. Talk business. Discuss territories and shipments and profits. Let everyone relax into the rhythm of it. Then, as dessert was being cleared, he set down his wine glass with careful precision. "There's something we need to discuss," he said in Korean, his voice cutting through the ambient conversation like a blade. "I've discovered a problem in our organization." The table went silent. "Someone has been stealing from us," Jae-Hoon continued. $20 million over the past 6 months, moved to offshore accounts using forged authorizations. He watched the faces around the table. Confusion. And from Sung-min, a perfect mask of concern. "Boss, that's terrible," Sung-min said smoothly. "Do we know who?" "Yes." Jae-Hoon pulled out his phone, displayed the photographs Regina had taken. "These documents were found in our archives. They bear my signature, except the signature is forged. And they're all countersigned by the same person." He slid the phone across the table. Sung-min's face went white as he saw his own name. That's not," he stammered. "Don't insult me with lies," Jae-Hoon said quietly. "I have bank records. Digital trails. Witness testimony. You've been bleeding this organization dry for months." Sung-min's mask finally cracked. His hand went inside his jacket. 3 guns appeared instantly, trained on him from around the table. Jae-Hoon's most loyal men already prepared. "Don't," Jae-Hoon advised. "You're not walking out of this room, Sung-min. The only question is whether you die quickly or slowly." "You arrogant bastard," Sung-min hissed, hand still on his weapon. "You think you're untouchable? You think your empire can't be broken? No. I know it can be broken. That's why I built redundancies. That's why I verify loyalty. That's why traitors like you always fail." Sung-min laughed, the sound edged with hysteria. "You think I'm alone? You think this is just me?" "I know about Darius Webb," Jae-Hoon said. "I know you've been coordinating with him. Feeding him information about my operations, helping him plan. What? A hostile takeover? An assassination? Both. The color drained from Sungmin's face completely. How? I have very good sources. Jae-Hoon stood slowly. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me everything about your arrangement with Darius. Every detail. Every plan. Every person involved. And if you do, I'll make your death quick. Sungmin looked around the table, saw no allies, no escape. His hand came away from his jacket. And pulled a gun anyway. The world exploded. Sungmin fired at Jae-Hoon, missed by inches as Jae-Hoon dove left. Return fire erupted from around the table. Glass shattered. Wood splintered. Men shouted in Korean. Blood sprayed across the expensive silk wallpaper. Jae-Hoon rolled behind an overturned table, drew his own weapon, a Sig Sauer P226 that felt like an extension of his hand, and returned fire in controlled bursts. Across the room, Sungmin had taken cover behind the bar, shooting wildly. He's not alone, one of Jae-Hoon's men shouted, and then his head snapped back, blood blooming from his temple. Jae-Hoon's head whipped around. 2 men by the door, men he'd trusted, men he'd promoted, had drawn weapons and were firing at his loyalists. The coup was bigger than he'd thought. The firefight intensified. The private dining room became a war zone, bullets chewing through wood, ricocheting off marble, shattering the crystal chandelier that crashed to the floor in an explosion of glittering shards. Jae-Hoon moved with lethal precision, years of training taking over. He dropped one traitor with a headshot, wounded another who went down screaming. But there were too many and his men were outnumbered. Across the chaos, he locked eyes with Sungmin. This doesn't end tonight. Sungmin shouted over the gunfire. Darius has the girl's sister. He has leverage. Your precious Regina will come crawling back to him, and when she does, we'll use her to break you piece by piece. Rage, white-hot and all-consuming, flooded Jae-Hoon's veins. He stood from cover, reckless, dangerous, and fired 3 shots in rapid succession. The first hit Sungmin in the shoulder. The second in the chest. The third, as Sungmin fell backward, caught him directly between the eyes. His body hit the floor and didn't move. But the damage was done. One of the traitors had reached the door, was escaping into the restaurant proper. Jae-Hoon chased, but the man was fast, desperate. He caught a glimpse of a woman's face, Sungmin's sister, Ji-yeon, who'd been waiting tables as cover, before she grabbed the escaping man's hand and they disappeared into the kitchen, then out the back exit into the Koreatown night. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called the cops. We need to move, Kang appeared at Jae-Hoon's elbow, materializing from nowhere. Now. They extracted through a pre-planned emergency route, leaving 3 dead enemies and 2 wounded allies behind. By the time the NYPD arrived, the room was empty except for corpses and the lingering scent of gunpowder. In the car racing back to the penthouse, Jae-Hoon checked his phone. 23 missed calls from Regina. His stomach dropped. Drive faster, he commanded. Regina nearly broke the door down when Jae-Hoon finally walked into the penthouse at 10:15 p.m. He was disheveled, blood spattered across his white shirt, not all of it his own, and there was a graze wound on his arm that he was trying to hide. She launched herself at him, checking for injuries with shaking hands. You're hurt. Oh God, you're bleeding? I'm fine. It's surface level. He caught her hands, held them still. Regina breathed. I'm okay. Someone sent me a photo of Destiny with a laser sight on her chest, she said, voice breaking. I thought, I couldn't reach you, I thought they'd killed you both. Destiny is safe. I had guards on her weeks ago. He pulled her close and she felt the rapid hammer of his heart against her cheek. The threat was fake. They were trying to panic you. It worked, she whispered into his chest. I know. I'm sorry. I should have warned you about the guards, but I didn't want to worry you. She pulled back enough to look at him. What happened at the meeting? His expression darkened. Sungmin is dead. But his sister Ji-yeon escaped. She was working with him and now she's with Darius. So it's not over. No. It's just beginning. He guided her to the couch, sat beside her. They're going to come for you, Regina. Darius knows you're the key to destabilizing me. Ji-yeon knows the layout of this building. Together, there. A sound from the hallway cut him off. Soft. Barely there. The whisper of fabric against wall. Jae-Hoon's hand went to his gun immediately. He put a finger to his lips, quiet, and moved toward the sound like a predator. Regina followed, heart in her throat. They found her in the kitchen. A young Korean woman in a plain black uniform, standing by the service entrance with what looked like a small electronic device in her hand. Ji-yeon. She looked up, saw them, and smiled. "You're too late," she said in accented English. "I've planted 4 listening devices. Darius knows everything now. Your routines. Your security protocols. Where Regina sleeps." Jae-Hoon raised his gun. "On your knees. Now." Ji-yeon didn't move. "Shoot me and you'll never find them all. But let me walk out of here and maybe, I'll tell you where I put them." "I'll take my chances," Jae-Hoon said coldly. Ji-yeon moved fast, faster than seemed possible, grabbing a kitchen knife and throwing it in one fluid motion. It whistled past Jae-Hoon's ear, embedded itself in the wall behind him. And then she ran. "Stay here." Jae-Hoon commanded Regina, but she was already chasing. "The hell I will." They pursued Ji-yeon through the penthouse, down hallways, through the dark library, into the service corridors that most guests never saw. Ji-yeon moved like she knew every inch of the space, which she did. She'd spent weeks mapping it, studying it, waiting for this moment. Regina cornered her in the laundry room, both women breathing hard. "You don't have to do this," Regina said, hands up, non-threatening. "Sungmin made his choices. You can make different ones." Ji-yeon laughed bitterly. "You think this is about choice? Darius has leverage on me too. My son. He's 11 years old. Darius said if I don't help him destroy Jae-Hoon, he'll kill my boy." Regina's heart clenched. "Then let us help you. We can protect your son. Get him somewhere safe." "You can't protect anyone." Ji-yeon's composure cracked. "Don't you get it? Darius owns this city. He owns you. You were always his asset, Regina. From the very beginning." Regina's blood turned to ice. "What are you talking about? You think you chose to work for Jae-Hoon? You think that was random?" Ji-yeon's smile was cruel. "Darius placed you here 3 years ago. Every choice you thought was yours, the job application, the interview, everything, he orchestrated all of it. You were his spy from day one." The words hit Regina like a physical blow. The room tilted. "No, that's not. Check your email history. Search for messages from Career Connect Employment Services. That was Darius's front. He filtered your application, made sure you got the interview, made sure you got hired. You were never free, Regina. You were always his tool." Regina's legs gave out. She sank against the washing machine, mind reeling. Every memory, every decision she'd thought was her own, suddenly recontextualized. Had anything in her life been real? Had she ever had agency, or had she always been a puppet on Darius's strings? Regina. Jae-Hoon appeared in the doorway, gun drawn. He saw her face, saw Ji-yeon, and his expression turned murderous. "What did you say to her?" "The truth." Ji-yeon backed toward the window. "That she's been your enemy from the start. That everything she knows about you, Darius knows. That you took a viper into your home and called it salvation." "That's not true," Regina whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Jae-Hoon didn't take his eyes off Ji-yeon. "Even if that was how it started, it's not how it is now. Regina chose to tell me about Sungmin. Chose to help me. Whatever Darius intended, she broke free of it." "Did she?" Ji-yeon's hand was on the window latch now. "Or is she just a very good actress?" She yanked the window open and dove through it. They were 40 stories up. Regina screamed, but Jae-Hoon was already moving. He reached the window in time to see Ji-yeon catch herself on the fire escape 1 floor down, then disappear into the darkness. "Damn it." He slammed his fist against the frame. Behind him, Regina had started crying, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. Jae-Hoon holstered his weapon and turned to her, dropping to his knees beside where she'd collapsed. "Hey, look at me. Regina, look at me." She raised her head, tears streaming down her face. "What if she's right? What if I've been his weapon this whole time? What if everything I thought I chose was just?" "Stop." He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I don't care how it started. I care about who you are now. And the woman you are now saved my life tonight. The woman you are now chose me over the man who terrorized her. That's real, Regina. Whatever came before, this is real. How can you trust me? Because I've spent 15 years learning to read people. And when I look at you, I don't see deception. I see courage. I see someone who's been fighting for survival her whole life and still managed to keep her soul intact." His thumbs brushed away her tears. "Darius might have put you in my path, but he didn't account for one thing." "What?" "That you'd be extraordinary. That I'd fall in love with you. That we'd become stronger together than either of us could be alone." Regina's breath caught. You love me?" "Yes." He said it simply, certainly, like it was the most obvious truth in the world. "I didn't plan to. Didn't want to. But somewhere between teaching you Korean and watching you hum gospel songs and seeing you risk everything to save me, I fell. Completely. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but these were different. Cleaner. I love you too. God help me, I love you too. He kissed her then, fierce and desperate, tasting salt and fear and hope. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. We're going to end this, he promised. Darius, Jiyeon, all of it. And then we're going to build something new. Something that's ours. How? By being smarter than they are. By using their assumptions against them. He stood, pulling her up with him. If Darius thinks you're still his asset, we can use that. Feed him false information through the devices Jiyeon planted. Make him think he's winning until we're ready to strike. Regina wiped her eyes, straightening her spine. What do you need me to do? Right now? I need you to breathe, rest, process what just happened. Tomorrow we plan. He guided her out of the laundry room through the darkened penthouse. And Regina? Whatever career connect was, whatever Darius intended, you're mine now. Mine to protect. Mine to love. And I don't lose what's mine. It should have sounded possessive. Controlling. But in his voice, Regina heard only promise. Only certainty. Only home. The call came at 3:47 a.m., 2 days after Jiyeon's escape. Regina was deep in restless sleep when her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She grabbed it reflexively, eyes barely open. Mount Sinai Hospital. The caller ID read. She was fully awake instantly, heart hammering. Hello? Miss Matthews? A woman's voice, clinical and urgent. This is Dr. Sarah Chen from Mount Sinai. I'm calling about your sister, Destiny. Regina sat up, ice flooding her veins. What happened? Is she okay? She's had a severe reaction to her latest treatment. We need you to come to the hospital immediately. She's asking for you. I'm on my way. Regina was already out of bed, pulling on clothes. Tell her I'm coming. Tell her to hold on. She should have stopped to think. Should have questioned the timing, the coincidence. But panic made her stupid and love made her blind. She scribbled a note for Jae-Hoon, emergency at hospital, back soon, and slipped out of the penthouse. Kang was stationed outside, but she convinced him she'd take one of the building's security escorts to the hospital. Mr. Park said you don't go anywhere alone, Kang protested. My sister is dying. I'll be fine. The hospital has security. It was the wrong decision. She knew it the moment she stepped into the black sedan waiting at the curb. Different from Jae-Hoon's usual cars, the driver unfamiliar. But by then it was too late. The door locks clicked shut. The driver pulled into traffic. And when Regina looked up, she saw Darius Webb grinning at her from the front passenger seat. Hello, baby, he said. Miss me? Regina's scream was cut off by Jiyeon's hand clamping over her mouth from behind. She'd been lying in wait on the floor of the back seat, invisible in the darkness. Don't fight, Jiyeon whispered. My son is still leverage. I do what Darius says or he dies. That includes keeping you quiet. Regina tried anyway. Thrashed. Bit down hard on Jiyeon's palm. But the other woman was strong, trained, desperate. A cloth covered Regina's mouth and nose, chemical sweet, suffocating. Chloroform. The world blurred. Darkened. Slipped away. She woke to cold. Bone deep, seeping cold that came from concrete floors and broken windows in Brooklyn in February. Her head pounded. Her mouth tasted like copper and chemicals. Her hands were zip-tied behind her back, secured to a metal pipe. Regina blinked against the dim light filtering through grimy windows and recognized where she was. Darius's warehouse. The place where she'd witnessed the murder that had started this whole nightmare. The place she'd sworn she'd never return to. There she is. Darius's voice, smooth as silk and twice as deadly. My beautiful girl, finally home. He crouched in front of her, and Regina got her first good look at him in months. He'd aged poorly, new lines around his eyes, gray threading through his hair, a hardness to his features that hadn't been there before. Violence and paranoia had carved themselves into his face. You've been busy, he continued, reaching out to touch her cheek. She flinched away and his expression darkened. Playing house with that Korean bastard. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think you could just walk away from me? You're insane, Regina spat. I was never yours. I was your prisoner. Prisoner. Partner. What's the difference? He stood, circling her like a shark. We could have built something, Regina. An empire. I had plans for us. But you had to go and ruin it by developing a conscience. You murdered someone in front of me. He was stealing from me. What was I supposed to do? Ask him nicely to stop. Darius's voice rose, anger flashing hot and fast. You always were too soft. Too weak. That's why I had to be strong for both of us. Regina forced herself to breathe slowly, to think through the fog of fear. You placed me with Jae-Hoon. Ji-yeon told me. Finally figured that out, did you? Darius laughed. Took you long enough. Yeah, I put you there. Needed someone on the inside feeding me information. You were perfect, smart enough to be useful, desperate enough to be controlled. Except I stopped feeding you information years ago. Oh, I know. You thought you were so clever, giving me nothing useful. But just having you there was enough. I knew Park's routines. Knew his security. Knew exactly how to bleed him dry because you gave me the foundation. Darius pulled out a knife, tested the edge against his thumb. And now you're going to help me finish the job. I'll die first. No. He pressed the knife to her throat, just hard enough to draw a bead of blood. Your sister will die first. Then that Korean boyfriend of yours. Then everyone you've ever loved. And you'll watch every single death and know it's your fault. That's how this ends, Regina. Unless you do exactly what I say. Over the next hours, Darius laid out his plan with chilling detail. He wanted Regina to call Jae-Hoon, lure him to a secondary location. A construction site Darius controlled, rigged with explosives and armed men. Once Jae-Hoon arrived, they'd kill him, dismantle his organization, and absorb his territories into Darius's growing empire. And if I refuse? Regina asked, though she already knew the answer. Then I have Ji-yeon make one phone call, and your sister stops breathing. Darius showed her his phone, a live video feed of Destiny's hospital room, where one of Darius's men stood just outside the door, hand resting casually on a concealed weapon. I own that hospital, Regina. I own the doctors. I own the security. Your sister lives because I allow it. She dies the moment I stop. Regina's mind raced, looking for angles, for escapes, for anything she could use. But she was tied up, outnumbered, and Destiny was genuinely in danger. How do I know you'll let her live if I cooperate? You don't. Darius smiled. But you know for certain I'll kill her if you don't. Those are your options. He handed her a burner phone, already dialing Jae-Hoon's number. Regina took it with shaking hands. The line rang once. Twice. Regina? Jae-Hoon's voice was sharp with worry. Where are you? Kang said you left for the hospital but you never. I'm sorry, she whispered and meant it. I'm so sorry. They have me. They have Destiny. You need to come alone to the address I'm going to give you, or they'll kill us both. Silence on the other end. Then, Regina, listen to me very carefully. Whatever they told you to say, I need you to know I'm coming for you. No matter what. Do you understand? Don't, she said, tears spilling down her face. It's a trap. They're going to kill you. Then I'll die getting you back. Give me the address. Darius held up a paper with the construction site location written on it. Regina read it off, each word a small betrayal. When she finished, Darius ended the call and tossed the phone aside. Good girl, he said, patting her head like she was a dog. See? You can still follow orders. He left her tied up in the corner while he and his men prepared, discussing strategy in low voices. Ji-yeon sat nearby, arms wrapped around herself, looking like she wanted to disappear. Your son, Regina said quietly. What's his name? Ji-yeon glanced at her, surprised. David. Korean name? Minjun. But he chose David for school. Wanted to fit in. Her voice cracked slightly. He's a good kid. Smart. Plays violin. Wants to be a doctor. Darius is going to kill him anyway, Regina said. You know that, right? Once this is over, once Jae-Hoon is dead, Darius won't need you anymore. He'll tie up loose ends. And your son is a loose end. Ji-yeon's face went pale. He promised? He's a liar. A murderer. A man who beats women and threatens children. What makes you think he'll keep his word? Because I have to believe it, Ji-yeon whispered. Because if I don't, then I've betrayed everything I believe in for nothing. Regina caught her eyes. It's not too late. Help me stop him. Help me save both our families. I can't. You can. You're stronger than he is. Stronger than you think. Regina leaned forward as much as her restraints allowed. My grandmother used to say that warriors aren't born, they're forged in fire. You've been through fire, Ji-yeon. Time to show them what it made you. For a long moment, Ji-yeon just stared at her. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small blade, the kind used for cutting zip ties. I must be insane, she muttered, moving to Regina's bonds. He's going to kill me for this. Only if he wins, Regina said. And we're not going to let him win. The zip ties fell away. Blood rushed back into Regina's hands, painful and electric. She flexed her fingers, grabbed the knife Jae-Hoon offered, and together they turned to face the warehouse where Darius and his men were preparing an execution. "There's a back exit," Jae-Hoon whispered. "Through the old loading bay. But it's watched. Then we don't run. We fight." Regina's voice was steady now, filled with a certainty she hadn't known she possessed. "And we buy Jae-Hoon enough time to get here with an army." Jae-Hoon nodded slowly. "There's a guard by the electrical panel. If we can short the power, we'll have 60 seconds of darkness and chaos. Can you get to the guard?" "Yes." "Then let's remind these men what happens when they underestimate women." They moved like ghosts through the warehouse, using shadows and sound to navigate. Regina's heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands were steady. She'd spent 3 years learning Darius's patterns, his routines, his weaknesses. She knew this warehouse like she knew her own fear, intimately, viscerally. And she was done being afraid. Jae-Hoon reached the guard first, a young man barely 20, and dispatched him with brutal efficiency, a hand over his mouth, blade to the throat, body lowered silently to the concrete. Regina looked away, stomach churning, but didn't protest. This was survival. This was war. Jae-Hoon found the electrical panel, studied it for a moment, then yanked 3 critical breakers. The warehouse plunged into darkness. Shouts erupted. Flashlights clicked on, beams cutting through the black. Regina used the confusion to move, staying low, keeping to the edges. She counted 7 men plus Darius, 8 total. Too many to fight directly. But maybe enough to divide. She found an old metal pipe, hefted it, and slammed it against a support beam. The clang echoed through the warehouse like a gunshot. "She's loose," someone shouted. "The bitch is loose." Flashlight beams swung her direction. Regina was already moving, using the maze of crates and equipment to stay ahead. Led them away from the exit. Keep them disorganized. By time. A gunshot split the air. Concrete exploded near her feet. "Alive!" Darius roared. "I want her alive." That was her advantage. They wouldn't shoot to kill. Not yet. Regina led 3 men on a chase through the warehouse. A deadly game of cat and mouse that had her heart in her throat and prayer on her lips. "Lord, if you're listening, if you're there, I need you now. I need warrior strength. I need my grandmother's faith. I need to survive this." She rounded a corner, found herself trapped against a wall. The 3 men closed in, guns drawn. "Nowhere to run," one of them said, smiling. Regina gripped the pipe tighter. "Good. I'm tired of running." She swung hard, caught the first man across the jaw. Bone crunched. He went down screaming. The second man lunged and she drove the pipe into his gut, doubled him over, brought it down on his spine. The third man got his hands on her, slammed her against the wall hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. His hands closed around her throat. "Stupid bitch," he hissed. "Should have stayed down." Black spots danced in her vision. Regina's hands scrabbled for purchase, found his face, and drove her thumbs into his eyes. He shrieked and released her. She dropped to the ground, gasping, and ran. She found Jae-Hoon near the loading bay, fighting 2 men with a skill that spoke of serious training. Regina jumped into the fray, swinging her pipe like her life depended on it, because it did. Together they drove the men back. One went down with a shattered knee. The other retreated, calling for backup. "The exit's clear," Jae-Hoon panted. "We can go." "No." Regina's jaw set. "Not without ending this." "Where's Darius?" "Regina, we can't. He'll never stop hunting us. Never stop threatening everyone we love. This ends tonight." "Where's Darius?" Jae-Hoon's expression shifted, something fierce and determined replacing the fear. "His office. 2nd floor, northeast corner." "Then that's where we go." They moved through the warehouse like avenging angels, leaving chaos in their wake. Regina felt something rising in her chest, not just anger or fear but power. The power of a woman who'd been broken and had forged herself back together stronger. The power of survival against impossible odds. Warrior strength. They found Darius in his office, surrounded by monitors showing security feeds of the now dark warehouse. He looked up as they entered, and for the first time Regina saw genuine surprise cross his features. "Well," he said slowly, reaching for the gun on his desk. "Aren't you full of surprises?" "It's over, Darius," Regina said. "Your men are scattered. Your plan failed. And Jae-Hoon is coming with enough firepower to level this building. Then I'll kill you before he arrives." Darius raised the gun, pointed it at her chest. "At least I'll have that satisfaction." "No." Jae-Hoon stepped in front of Regina. You won't. Jae-Hoon, what are you? Protecting my son. Really protecting him, not just hoping a monster keeps his word. She looked at Darius and her voice was steel. You made me betray my brother. Made me compromise everything I believe in. But I'm done. Shoot me if you want. But you're not touching her. Darius's face twisted with rage. You stupid. The windows exploded inward in a shower of glass. Jae-Hoon came through the window like vengeance incarnate, Kong and 6 armed men behind him. They rappelled down from the roof, guns drawn, moving with military precision. The office erupted into gunfire. Darius dove for cover, squeezing off shots wildly. Jae-Hoon tackled Regina to the ground, shielding her with her own body as bullets tore through the air above them. Jae-Hoon's voice cut through the chaos, speaking rapid Korean, commands, coordinates, tactical instructions. His men moved like a single organism, advancing on Darius's position with lethal efficiency. Regina scrambled to her feet, saw Darius making for the back exit and gave chase. Warrior strength pumped through her veins, gospel hymns played in her memory, and she ran faster than she'd ever run in her life. She caught him on the metal stairs leading down to the warehouse floor. Grabbed his jacket, yanked hard. He stumbled, turned, backhanded her across the face. Pain exploded through her cheek. She tasted blood. But she didn't fall. You hit like a man who's afraid, Regina said, spitting blood. Like you know you've already lost. Darius's eyes were wild. I made you. You were nothing before me. I gave you purpose, gave you strength. You gave me nothing but nightmares. Regina's voice was quiet, deadly. But I made something out of them anyway. I survived you, Darius. And that's the one thing you can't stand. He lunged at her with the knife, the same knife he'd held to her throat earlier. Regina sidestepped, years of dodging his violence finally put to offensive use. She caught his wrist, twisted, drove her knee into his gut. The knife clattered to the metal stairs. They both dove for it. Regina got there first, fingers closing around the handle. But Darius was stronger. He wrenched her arm back, slammed her against the railing. The knife skittered away, fell through the gaps in the stairs, disappeared into the darkness below. His hands closed around her throat for the second time that night. Should have killed you years ago, he hissed. Should have known you'd be nothing but trouble. Regina's vision tunneled. Her hands clawed at his fingers, finding no purchase. This was it. After everything, after surviving so much, she was going to die on these stairs at the hands of the man who'd tortured her for years. No. The word rose from somewhere deep, somewhere primal. The place where her grandmother's faith lived, where her sister's love resided, where Jae-Hoon's promise echoed. No. Not today. Not like this. Not by his hands. Regina stopped pulling at Darius's fingers and instead drove her thumbs into his eyes, hard, vicious, desperate. He screamed and released her. She sucked in air, coughing, and kicked him as hard as she could in the chest. Darius stumbled backward, arms pinwheeling, and went over the railing. He fell 20 feet to the concrete below. The impact echoed through the warehouse like thunder. Regina looked down, saw his body twisted at an unnatural angle and felt nothing. No satisfaction. No guilt. Just exhaustion and relief and the desperate need to find Jae-Hoon. She turned and ran back up the stairs. The office was a war zone. Bodies on the ground, Darius's men, all of them. Jae-Hoon sat against the wall, blood soaking through her shoulder but alive. Kong was barking orders in Korean, coordinating extraction. And Jae-Hoon. Jae-Hoon stood in the center of the room, suit torn, blood streaking his face, gun still raised. When he saw Regina, something cracked in his expression. The cold killing machine dissolved, replaced by raw relief and fear and love. Regina. She crossed to him in 3 strides and threw herself into his arms. He caught her, held her so tight she could barely breathe and she didn't care. His heart thundered against her ear. His hands shook as they touched her hair, her face, checking for injuries. I thought. His voice broke. When we got here and the warehouse was dark and I heard gunshots. I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm here. He pulled back just enough to see her face, thumb brushing the split on her lip where Darius had hit her. His expression turned murderous. Did he? He's dead, Regina said quietly. He fell. I didn't mean to kill him, but I'm not sorry. Good. Jae-Hoon cupped her face and when he spoke it was in Korean first, then English. I love you. God, Regina, I love you so much. Don't ever, his voice cracked again. Don't ever scare me like that again. I won't. I promise. I'm done being bait. Done being the damsel. From now on we fight together. Together, he agreed and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. Wasn't soft. It was desperate and claiming and full of all the fear they'd both been carrying. It tasted like blood and smoke and survival. When they broke apart, Ji-yeon was being helped to her feet by one of Jae-Hoon's men. What about her? Kang asked, voice hard. She helped them. She saved me, Regina said. She had a choice and she chose right. That counts for something. Jae-Hoon studied Ji-yeon for a long moment. Your son. Where is he? My apartment in Queens. With my mother. Kang. Send men to retrieve them. Bring them to a safe house. Full protection. He looked at Ji-yeon. You work for me now. You help us clean up this mess, testify against anyone else involved in Sungmin's conspiracy, and I protect your family. Deal? Ji-yeon's eyes filled with tears. Why would you do that? Because Regina asked me to. And because everyone deserves a second chance. He extended his hand. Do we have a deal? She took it, relief flooding her features. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Sirens wailed in the distance. NYPD finally responding to reports of gunfire. Jae-Hoon's men were already moving, erasing evidence, sanitizing the scene with practiced efficiency. We need to go, Kang said. They extracted through the loading bay, leaving the warehouse and its ghosts behind. In the car, Regina finally let herself shake, let herself feel the full weight of what had just happened. Jae-Hoon pulled her against his chest, one arm around her shoulders, the other hand clasped tight with hers. It's over, he murmured into her hair. Really over. You're safe now. We're safe, she corrected. Both of us. As they drove through Brooklyn toward Manhattan, snow began to fall again, soft, clean, covering the blood and violence with temporary peace. Regina closed her eyes and let herself believe for the first time in years that she might actually have a future. A future with the man who'd found her dying in the snow and chosen to save her instead of walking away. A future built on ashes and scars and love forged in fire. A future that was finally, beautifully, theirs. The foundation's opening ceremony was held on a crisp October morning, the kind where autumn had fully arrived but winter still felt far away. The building stood in Harlem, a renovated brownstone that had once been a gang safe house and was now something infinitely better. Regina stood on the front steps, looking up at the sign, the Destiny and Minji Foundation for At-Risk Youth. Named after her sister and Jae-Hoon's, a tribute to the children they couldn't save but could honor by saving others. You ready? Jae-Hoon appeared at her elbow, immaculate in a charcoal suit, hair perfectly styled. But there was warmth in his eyes now, a softness that hadn't existed a year ago. Almost. She straightened his tie, a gesture that had become ritual between them. Just thinking about how we got here. Long journey. Worth it though. He caught her hand, kissed her knuckles. Every second. The past year had been a whirlwind. After Darius's death and Sungmin's coup, Jae-Hoon had restructured his entire organization. Some operations he'd shut down completely, the drug trafficking, the illegal weapons. Others he'd legitimized, the restaurants, the real estate holdings, the import businesses. He'd never be completely clean. Men like him didn't get to wash their hands entirely. But he was trying, and that meant something. Regina had been beside him through all of it. Not as his maid or even his aide, but as his partner. Equal voice. Equal authority. She'd discovered she had a knack for business, for reading people, for seeing angles others missed. Together they'd built something new. Something that honored their pasts while reaching toward a better future. The foundation was the culmination of that vision. A place where kids orphaned by gang violence, whether Korean, Black, Latino, any background, could find safety, education, mentorship. A place that blended Black community healing traditions with Korean concepts of honor, discipline, and filial duty. A place that might have saved them both, if it had existed when they needed it. 5 minutes, Kang called from inside. He'd stayed on as head of security, but now he protected children instead of criminal enterprises. He seemed lighter for it. Ji-yeon appeared next, holding her son David's hand. The boy was taller now, confidence replacing the fear that had shadowed him. He'd become the foundation's first official mentor in training, helping other kids navigate trauma with the wisdom of someone who'd survived it. Mrs. Park, Ji-yeon said, still adjusting to Regina's new legal name, the children are ready for the ribbon cutting. Thank you, Ji-yeon. Regina smiled at her. They'd become unlikely friends, bonded by shared trauma and the hard work of healing. And it's Regina. Please. Old habits, Ji-yeon said with a small smile. The ceremony was beautiful. Destiny was there, 2 years cancer-free, glowing with health and studying social work at NYU. Mrs. Han had prepared a feast that blended soul food and Korean cuisine: fried chicken and kimchi, collard greens and japchae, sweet potato pie and rice cakes. The children performed a mixture of gospel songs and traditional Korean music, their voices rising together in unexpected harmony. Regina gave a speech about resilience, about how warriors aren't born but forged in fire, about how trauma doesn't have to define you but can transform you into something stronger. She saw parents crying, saw kids listening with fierce attention, saw her own story reflected in dozens of faces. Then Jae-Hoon spoke, his English still accented but clear, about honor and duty and the responsibility successful people have to lift up those behind them. About how his mother would have loved this place, how his sister would have thrived here. About how loving Regina had taught him that strength isn't about how hard you hit, but about what you choose to build after the fighting stops. When he finished, Regina took his hand and together they cut the ribbon. The children flooded inside, laughing and exploring, and for a moment Regina just watched them. Saw futures unfolding. Saw hope taking root. "You did good," Jae-Hoon murmured in her ear. "We did good," she corrected. "All of us." That evening, after the ceremony ended and the guests departed, Regina and Jae-Hoon returned to their penthouse. It was the same space where she'd first woken up after nearly freezing to death, but it felt different now. Warmer. More alive. They'd filled it with small touches of both their heritages: gospel vinyl records next to Korean incense, photos of Brooklyn brownstones beside landscapes of Seoul, Regina's grandmother's recipes bound in leather beside Jae-Hoon's mother's jewelry. A home built from two broken pasts. Regina found Jae-Hoon on the balcony staring out at the city. The October wind was cool but not cold, carrying the promise of winter but not its bite. She joined him, sliding under his arm, and they stood together in comfortable silence. "There's something I need to tell you," Regina said finally. He tensed slightly. "What?" "Don't panic. It's good." She pulled out the small stick she'd hidden in her pocket, showed him the two pink lines. "We're going to have a baby." Jae-Hoon's breath